Hey everyone, Jack Keeper here, and today I'm going to talk about Garuda Linux. Why? Well, because I switched to Garuda. I know it, right? You're probably thinking, what? How am I going to sleep tonight? You just turned my world upside down. But it's okay. I'm really a distro hopper, so I don't usually jump from distro to distro, and I've been using OpenSUSE now for probably a year and really love it. Don't have anything bad to say about it at all. However, a few days ago I was surfing on YouTube and I came across a review from DistroTube regarding Garuda Linux, and it was a review that he did about 2 weeks ago from the time of this recording, and I was really impressed, so I decided I'm going to give it a shot. And so not only did I just test it out, but I also did a full install. Now, given that I know my way around Linux pretty well, I knew that if this was going to be disastrous, I could easily go back to OpenSUSE without any problem. Within an hour, I could just kind of be back where I left off. So that really wasn't anything that I felt was an issue, but I really wanted to see it more than just in a virtual environment. I wanted to actually experience it and use it and see what it was like. So that's what I want to share with you today, is what my experience is so far, and will I keep it around as a daily driver, or will I go back? Well, first of all, in case you're wondering what Garuda Linux is, I'm out here at the web page right now, and Garuda Linux actually, I think, is developed by a team in India. They have done a fantastic job. I'm using KDE, and I'm using the Dragonized edition, which I think is absolutely gorgeous. I really think I made the right choice there. And I'm a KDE fan anyways. I really like the KDE Plasma desktop, and it's very efficient, and it looks great. So to me, it's just hard to beat. So anyway, Garuda Linux comes in all kinds of flavors though. You can get it in KDE, GNOME, XFCE, Cinnamon, Mate, LXQt-KWin, a deepened Wayfire, BSPWM, and i3WM. And there's probably even more that I don't even know about. So anyways, this is kind of the web page here. And if you go into their download area, you can kind of get an idea of the requirements. For example, they recommend about 30 gigs of space and 4 gigs of RAM, which is typically higher than a lot of distros. 8 gigs ideally. I have 16 on this machine, so I'm good with that. I would probably recommend having at least decent hardware. Now, the computer I'm running right now isn't like the super gamer computer of the century. It's just an average computer running an i7 processor. It's an all-in-one Dell, actually, so it's not a powerhouse gaming machine by any stretch, but it is a good, decent, fast processor. It has a nice GPU on it too, a reasonable anyway, compared to some all-in-ones. And it runs just fine. It's very snappy. And the flavor that I ran was this, Garuda KDE, like Mr. DistroTube pointed out. These guys know what they're doing. I think this is hands down probably the most beautiful desktop they have. This is suiteified. They're using the suite theming in the desktop along with the icon theme, which I believe is called Beauty Line. And I really like that too. That's a great complement for this theme. And they just have it all tweaked out, so you have just a great, incredible experience. Open up a window and the background blurs and all that, so it's very cool. And the size of this image is about 2 gigs, which is kind of your average size when you're installing a Linux that's full of apps. So this one is actually more trimmed down and doesn't have a lot of the bulk in there. So I ended up installing a lot of stuff myself, like the Office suite and all that other stuff, multimedia and graphics apps. I actually installed. There really wasn't much to speak of by default as far as graphic apps, and there was no Office Suite at all. So that was something that I installed myself. And so I kind of preferred that because it gave me a little more choice where I could kind of install the stuff I wanted to, and I didn't really have to uninstall any real unnecessary things. They also have an Ultimate Edition here that's geared, I think, more towards gaming. We have a gaming edition, and that one's a much bigger ISO. That's about 4.6 gigs, I think. So it's pretty big. Yeah. So anyways, let's take a look. So I simply downloaded this ISO, and then I just went ahead and reinstalled it on my machine, and I have my home folder on a separate partition, so I just simply pointed it to my existing home folder. However, to make the theming work, I really had to rename my home folder when I was inside the live version, so that way it would generate a new home folder and it wouldn't hose up my theming, and I could still kind of keep my OpenSUSE settings just in case something went horribly wrong. And then I simply moved everything from my old home folder into my new one when I booted into Garuda, if that makes any sense. Now, let's just take a look at the desktop real quick. This was the desktop, and it actually had a different wallpaper on there originally. I changed it to this one, which is one of the default wallpapers, just to be different. And as you notice, the layout's different than my standard OpenSUSE layout. Down here we have a dock. This is called Latte Dock from KDE, and it's kind of Mac OS-ish in its layout. And up here we have our taskbar on top and access to your menus here. And also what you get is what they call a global menu. So if you open something up like Dolphin here, you'll notice a global menu up here similar to like what you would see on a Mac. So that is a really cool feature. I like that. And here's your open, close, minimize, and so forth. So I really like the global menu, and even if I shrink that a little bit, the global menu stays intact. And I ended up on the wrong desktop, so let me change that. All right, that's better. So where was I? Oh, and another thing I like is the global menu works with Firefox. Now, I've read a lot about global menus in Firefox, and typically it doesn't work with Firefox. People just have all kinds of trouble. So I think Garuda, the guys at Garuda, probably have a custom version of Firefox that was modified to work with this global menu, and they have it installed by default. So I think that's cool, unless that issue was resolved, but the last I knew it wasn't. So you had to have a custom install of Firefox to work with that. So I think they took care of that for you, and so it's a non-issue in Garuda. So I like that. That's very cool. I also made a version, a layout version, because in here you have your layouts and you can select, and I added another version, a traditional version, just in case I wasn't going to warm up to this, but I am actually warming up to it. In the beginning, the global menu and all that, and having, you know, this over here was a little, it was kind of funky and a little uncomfortable. And we had icons only here, which at first I wasn't real warmed up to either, because I kind of like having the, you know, the title in there too. But, you know, now I've kind of warmed up to it, and I really kind of like it better, you know, and having the dock down here. This is nice. I can just get quick access to items here. And so, yeah, I am liking this. But in the beginning, I did create an alternate layout, which I can easily switch, and I just called it traditional. And in your manage layouts area is where you can create new layouts. And essentially what I did was I just duplicated this one, and then I just kind of changed things around and got rid of the dock. So if I were going to switch over here to traditional, then we have something that's more familiar. Our global menu is gone, and we have our taskbar at the bottom now, and it looks more like kind of a, what I call a traditional layout. I know they have a name for this type of layout, but I just can't think of what it is right at the moment. So this is kind of our traditional layout. And so that was something I kind of tweaked in the beginning, was I put this in here so I could kind of choose. And then after a while I decided, yeah, let's kind of go with this for a while. And I really started warming up to it. So I'm starting to see the appeal that people have for this kind of layout. I think it's kind of cool. And so anyway, and like I said, this is the Latte dock, and it's installed by default in Garuda. And so I do like that. When I modified the Latte, one thing I had to do was I wanted to put a spacer in between here, this menu, and this stuff over here, the pager and the application menu, because they were all kind of crowding each other. And you know, I couldn't find a spacer for the life of me. It was kind of frustrating. So I had to do a little bit of Googling, and after some Googling I found out that the spacer is actually a Latte spacer, a widget, and it is not by default included in this widget set. So what I did was I went out here and I hit get new widgets and download plasma widgets, and in here I just simply did a search for Latte spacer, and it came right up, and I just hit install, and it added it to my widget collection. So what I did was I just went in here and took this guy and I just dragged it up into my taskbar, and we were good. And I think I just messed up my display somehow. I must have inadvertently dragged something. Let me see. Looks like I unhosed it. Which kind of leads me into another thing I can bring up here. One feature that is very cool, and I haven't really used it yet in Garuda, is the time shift. So if you end up hosing something on your system and you just can't recover, time shift makes little snapshots. And let me just jump in there real quick, and you can go in here and reset it back to where it was before it got hosed. So right now there's 5 snapshots here, and it looks like the last one was from, I don't even know today's date, the 10th. So from yesterday, around 1822. So yesterday evening, it took another snapshot. So I could roll back to the way it was last night around 6:22 p.m. And then that would kind of undo everything that I did. Now, as far as hosing that bar up there, I guess that wouldn't have made much difference there. But this time shift is a really nice thing. And by default, I believe it's enabled. And you can simply turn it off if you don't like having snapshots. But to me, it seems like it can only be a good thing. So now when I installed Garuda originally, the Dragonized version doesn't come with much bloat. So it's not really that trimmed down either. But, you know, like, for example, in the development menu, the only thing I had to add really, well, I added Mono Develop. Mono Develop is something I like to play with. And this is version 7.8 in here. In fact, this is an Arch distro. So Garuda is based on Arch, whereas OpenSUSE is on the RPM Real, I believe is how they pronounce it, type. And the Arch repositories, Mono Develop really doesn't work well with OpenSUSE. The most recent version that I can get working on OpenSUSE is 5.5, which is pretty ancient. So MonoDevelop is not really a viable place to use on OpenSUSE, where here in Arch it's a lot different. Now I'm kind of familiar with Arch because I've used Arch for a long time, long before I ever installed OpenSUSE. It's not a big stretch for me to change, and I like the repositories, the AUR and all that, and I guess it's a little more cutting edge. Well, it is actually. But anyways, I'm getting on a tangent. So I installed MonoDevelop, and I also installed the Qt Creator, so that wasn't there originally. And I also reinstalled my Lazarus, which is on the desktop, but I did that through FPC Up Deluxe, which is in one of my previous videos, and so that's why it's not showing up here in the menu. So if we move down to Games, this is cool. I installed Mame Arcade Emulator. Originally there was pretty much nothing in here. However, in the welcome screen there is, see, where did I, right here, Garuda Gamer. This is something I kind of stumbled across, and I opened it up, and in the Garuda Gamer, this is really cool because even though we didn't install the gaming edition, you can get it all set up for it, and so I really like that. I'm not really a big gamer, so for me it's not a deal breaker one way or another. However, it's really nice that you have access to this, so you can easily install Steam, Lutris, and what else? And your Proton. Proton is essentially an edition of Wine with modules that are optimized for gaming. So that way you can get something set up like a Windows game and get it working a lot easier in Proton than you would versus just a Wine and Winetricks setup. Personally, I kind of like Play on Linux for that kind of stuff. Oops. Because with Play on Linux, it makes it very easy to just install things and set up your environments and all that with very little effort. So that's kind of a personal favorite of mine. And one thing I notice is when you hit this checkbox, it'll just start installing automatically, so it just kind of goes right in and does its thing. And so you want to be aware of that. So it's got a lot of stuff. You can really get yourself all set up really with no issues at all. And then I saw emulators, and I was like, wow, how cool is that? I downloaded the Mame emulator, I think, for the first time maybe 15 years ago, a long time ago. But probably about 5 years ago, I installed it again after I had switched to Linux. And I switched to Linux back probably around 2013, roughly. So it was a long time ago when I abandoned Windows. I just couldn't take it any longer. And my wife followed along about a year later when she couldn't stand it any longer. And she never looked back, and neither have I. So anyway, when you hit this, it will automatically install Mame, and it's an arcade emulator. So if you were ever a fan of arcades, and if you're like ancient like I am, 100 years plus, then you'll remember the arcades with such classics as Defender, Space Invaders, Donkey Kong, and Street Fighter and all that stuff. So you can play all that on Mame. Now it doesn't include the ROMs. The ROMs you got to get separately. And I just happen to have a folder with the ROMs, a bunch of ROMs in it that I downloaded years ago. And I don't remember where I got it. I think it was a torrent pack or something, and they just had a gazillion ROMs in it, and I downloaded it, and yeah, went with it. But if you wanted to download Mame ROMs, probably the easiest way to do that would be to just jump out and do a Google search for Mame ROMs, and there's a lot of websites out there that just have ROM searches where you can just download a ROM, all the ROMs you want for the different games. And if you want to take a quick look, we'll just kind of check it out real quick. And I'll just give you a little tour. And so here's the emulator, and you know, there's just a bunch of different things on here. Defender's kind of cool. That's something I used to play once in a while. And so we'll just launch it real quick. And check it out. It is the original game. If you ever played Defender back in the day. I can't remember what the keys are, but if you press 5, that'll insert a coin. And press 1 to start. And I got it rigged up to my mouse. And then fire, you can either use the left click mouse button or the right, or the left alt, I mean. And to accelerate, I forgot. My right mouse, I can accelerate. And Z for switching directions. And I forgot the keyboard. Oh yeah, left control is accelerate. Yeah, and I can't really talk and blow up aliens at the same time. But so if you like some classic gaming, that's the way to go. So anyways, that's that. I'm gonna jump out of here real quick. So that's Mame Arcade. And so that was really easy to install. Okay, the other thing, graphics. By default, the only thing that was in here was Ocular and XDVI and GwenView, the image viewer. So what I installed was Blender, GIMP, and Inkscape. So, you know, not a big deal. And so if I go back here and then internet, I really didn't have to add anything here. This was all in by default. And Firefox is the browser. I also use Chrome, but I haven't really installed it yet. And Multimedia, what I added here, everything was in here except for Shotcut, OBS Studio, MKV Toolnix, and DroidCam. So those I installed myself using the package manager, which I'll show you in a minute. And then Office Suite, there was really nothing in here other than Ocular, which is a PDF viewer. So I installed WPS Office using the package installer. I like WPS because it's very Office-like. Like here we have spreadsheets, and you know, it's just like Excel. It does, you know, things that maybe some people wouldn't use, but I like the fact that you can sort by color. And a lot of the, like LibreOffice, for example, you can't do that. And I don't think they're really interested in adding that feature, but for me, that's kind of an important feature because of the way I run my spreadsheets. And I like to be able to sort by color. And so, yeah, you know, and all the formulas that work in Excel seem to work in this. So what the heck, for free. It's a great deal. Yeah. Okay, so that's Office. And then, of course, we have our settings, utilities, and all that. And in the utilities, I added KeyPass for managing passwords. But all this other stuff was in here by default. Like the Latte Dock, which is this coolness you got up here. So when I install applications, I typically just use the good old terminal, but you can go in here under System and open the Package Manager by selecting Add Remove Software, and you got the Package Manager where you can install all kinds of great stuff and things that are already installed. So the remove option. And the other thing I really like is that this package manager is already set up by default to access the AUR as well. You're going to get access, if you do a search, to both the AUR and the repositories. which I really like. So I didn't have to go in there and activate that manually. And then if you just want to do a search and install something, then you can just put a search in here like KDN Live, and it'll come right up, and just hit install and you're good to go. Yeah, the package manager is kind of like an app store on your phone. And then of course here you have an app image available, which is cool. And then your Git versions. So where you see build, these are apps that are in the AUR. And then when you have an install option, then these are apps that are in the repositories. So typically it's faster to install something from the repository, whereas here it'll build it from source. So it takes a little bit longer, but there are situations where you might want to go that way. And if I were going to be using KDN Live, I would recommend using the app image, especially if you needed to, like, certain features, I think, like speeding up audio, but not changing the pitch, something like that doesn't work for some reason in the regular install, but if you use the app image, it works. Some kind of bug. And anyways, it's kind of corrected. For some reason it works in the app image and it doesn't here. So I don't know what's up with that, but a little trivia. But like I was saying, I just like using the old console. And so if you're going to install something using the console, it would be Pac-Man and Arch. So if you're an Ubuntu user, you're probably used to sudo apt get install blah blah blah, and here it would be install like Inkscape, like your app that you want to install, and then it'll find it for you right away and just hit yes. Of course I already have it in here, so it's letting me know that it would reinstall it if I wanted to upgrade it or just reinstall, which I don't want to do. But it's really fast. That's why I use the terminal most of the time, because I know what I'm looking for, and it's a lot quicker just to hit my up arrow key and type in my app. And then we're good. So yeah. All right. Onward and upward. The other thing I did was I modified the theme just a tad, because by default it uses the sweet dark theme, and as you can see it does have pretty much a dark theme. But the other thing I did was I modified the theme just a little bit, because by default everything is dark. It's a dark theme, and even inside here it's all dark. So the black background was black in here by default, which I really didn't like. I didn't like that. And in Garuda there is a plugin that's activated in Firefox, and so I had to turn off that plugin, and that had me confused at first, because even after I changed my theme settings it was still dark inside Firefox, even though everywhere else it was normal. And so that turned out to be a plugin, and so I simply had to go into my preferences, actually add-ons, and there was a right here called Dark Reader, and this was enabled, so I had to turn that off, and then Dark Reader changed my background back to being light again. So that's something you want to keep in mind if you try out Garuda Linux and you don't like the background in Firefox. That will take care of that. And so the other apps, like for example here when I open up Dolphin, we have our light background. I didn't want that dark either. So for my other apps, especially when I'm developing, that dark background carries over into the form designer, like when I'm using Lazarus. So what I did to change that was I simply went into my settings, and then by default the global theme was set to Sweetified Plasma. So to turn that off, actually I changed, to turn that off I just came down here to Plasma Style, and then I set this to Sweet Mars, then went to Colors, and set the colors to the breeze style here. And then that gave me a bright background, but I was able to keep the darkness of the taskbar here and the sweet Windows decoration. And if for some reason that changes on you, all you had to do was go in here to application style, and I set it here as well to breeze, just to kind of change my buttons so the buttons weren't black either. I don't think I had to do anything in Windows decorations because it stayed dark here, but this is where you would go if you wanted to change your upper part here. So if you didn't like the Mac style dots here, then you could change it here and just give it some other look, like a Windows 10-ish look or whatever, and that would change that. Now by default too, I believe Garuda had these controls over on this side, which to me just kind of felt a little uncomfortable. I wanted them over here instead, and the way I changed that was I went over here to title bar buttons, and they were over here, and so I just slid them over here like that, so that they were on this side, and then I just hit apply, and then they moved over. So that's something you can keep in mind too, if for some reason you don't like these guys being on the left hand side as opposed to the right hand side. So yeah, so that's how I kind of modified that. So what do I think so far? I gotta tell you, I really like it. I think I might keep it and use it as my daily driver. So I don't think I'm gonna switch back just yet. In fact, I think I'm just gonna kind of keep it. The other thing I really like is that it's very zippy. Now, I've seen some reviews where, let's see, let's go into our console real quick and run HTOP. And my RAM usage right now is going to be really sky high. Well, not as bad as I thought, I guess, 3 gigs. That's actually pretty good considering the fact that I'm running my screen capturing software and recording and all that. And I got something open here on my second desktop. We do have 2 desktops, and so I got some things open here, and my recording software, my Droid Cam and all that is on my second desktop. So considering all this stuff going on, that's pretty good. But you know, I've heard some reviews saying if you run it on an idle, like right after boot up, and you just bring this up with pretty much nothing running, I think it's like over 1 gig. You know, compared to other distros, if you do the same thing, you might have maybe 720, 730 megabytes running as opposed to this. And I think the reason for that, and this is actually snappier even though it's showing more memory. And at first I thought, well, how can that be? But then I realized that Garuda is using ZRAM, and with ZRAM, that's a form of swap. When you install Linux, it uses a swap partition, which makes memory paging more efficient. And ZRAM is even more efficient than just traditional swap because it's using sections of your RAM to make virtual drives, I guess, or partitions, so to speak, which makes memory paging really efficient and fast. It's actually, I think, better than, you know, like using a swap partition. And so that's where some of that memory is going, is actually, it's being used in that ZRAM. And the ZRAM is very efficient, and I really think that's why I'm getting this snappiness, because overall the operating system is very snappy, it's very responsive, and I think it's even more responsive than my OpenSUSE install. So I gotta say, I'm super impressed with it. I really haven't found any cons at this time. I was trying to think of a con that I could come up with. Earlier I had a little trouble with the menu up there, so I can't really say that's a con because that was probably my fault. I kind of dragged something from the widget and messed it up, but that's not anybody's fault except my own. And the only reason that happened is because I'm bald. So anyways, that should cover it. So I guess if I was going to give it a review in stars, I'd have to give it a 5-star. You know, I just don't have any complaints with it at all. I've been using this for about a week now, and it's just been working flawlessly. Just no issues whatsoever. And so yes, I have no complaints. It's just great. So I'm going to keep it around for a while, and I'll probably do some future tutorials in this OS. So with that, I guess we'll wrap it up. And I appreciate you watching my view, and don't forget, hit that like button if you like this video, and don't forget to subscribe. Thanks for watching.